Michael Jordan was quietly enjoying his meal when he noticed something that stopped him mid-bite. A waitress, exhausted, overworked, and barely holding it together. Her shoes were falling apart, her hands trembled from fatigue, but she kept pushing through. Then a rude customer snapped his fingers at her like she was nothing. The entire diner went silent, but instead of stepping in right away, Jordan leaned back, a knowing smirk forming. He had a plan. What he did next didn't just change her life. It shocked everyone watching. Stay till the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan sat in the dimly lit corner of the diner, his hood pulled low over his face, blending into the background. His presence went unnoticed. Just another customer nursing a cup of coffee. But his eyes never left the woman weaving between tables, balancing trays, dodging impatient customers, and forcing a tired smile with every order she delivered. Lisa Carter had been moving nonstop for hours. The exhaustion in her movements was impossible to ignore. Her steps heavy, her shoulders tense, and her hands trembling slightly as she carried a tray stacked with plates. Her uniform, once crisp and clean, was faded, the fabric thinning at the seams. The soles of her shoes were worn down to almost nothing, barely cushioning her aching feet. Jordan had seen perseverance before, but something about her struggle struck him differently. A loud voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "Hey, I've been waiting 20 minutes!" A man at the counter waved his empty coffee cup impatiently. Lisa turned, flashing an apologetic smile, though the exhaustion in her eyes betrayed her. "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me get that for you right now." She rushed to refill his cup, only for another customer to grab her attention with an irritated sigh. "Miss, I asked for no onions. This is wrong." Lisa inhaled sharply, biting back the frustration that was surely building inside her. "I'll fix that right away." Jordan watched as she darted back and forth, her energy running on pure determination. It was clear she had been on her feet for hours, yet she never once snapped back, never let her frustration show. She simply kept going. A younger waitress, no older than 20, brushed past her and whispered, "Lisa, you okay?" Lisa nodded quickly, but Jordan noticed the way her fingers twitched, the way she stretched her neck to ease the strain. She wasn't okay. She was barely holding on. Jordan leaned back, drumming his fingers on the table. He'd met athletes who pushed their bodies to the limit, who gritted their teeth through pain. But this was different. This wasn't just about endurance. This was survival. Lisa was fighting every second, not for herself, but for something bigger. Jordan could see it. He had seen that fire before. And he knew one thing for sure. Tonight, he wasn't leaving this diner without doing something about it. He took one last sip of his coffee, his mind already made up. This was going to be a night Lisa Carter would never forget. Lisa wiped her hands on her apron and approached the recently emptied table. The man in the hoodie had left without a word. His plate cleared, coffee barely touched. She sighed, ready to grab the bill and drop it at the register. But the moment her fingers touched the slip of paper, her breath hitched. The number scrawled on the tip line wasn't $20. It wasn't even $100. Lisa's hands trembled as she stared at the digits. $10,000. A sharp breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she rechecked the amount, convinced she had misread it. But there it was, $10,000, sitting under the signature of a man she barely noticed until now. Her knees nearly buckled. $10,000 could change everything. It could cover months of rent, pay off her past due bills, get Malik, her son, new clothes and school supplies. It was the kind of money she had spent years dreaming about, but never dared to hope for. But why? Why would a stranger, someone she barely spoke to, leave this? Her instincts kicked in. Too good to be true. Lisa spun on her heels, her legs moving before she could think. She spotted him near the door, hands in his pockets, walking as if he hadn't just dropped a life-altering amount of money on a random waitress. "Sir, wait!" Her voice cracked as she hurried after him, gripping the check tightly in her fingers. The man turned, his face partially hidden under the shadow of his hoodie, but she caught a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Lisa thrust the check forward. This has to be a mistake." His lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Why would it be? Lisa's pulse raced. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to take the money, to let herself breathe for the first time in years. But something inside her, something stubborn, something proud, wouldn't let her. She swallowed hard, gripping the check tighter. "I can't accept this," she said, her voice steady but uncertain. Jordan's eyebrow lifted slightly, intrigued. For the first time that night, he realized Lisa Carter was different. Lisa's fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the check, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she refused to let it show. The man standing in front of her exuded a quiet confidence, the kind she had only ever seen in people who never had to second-guess themselves. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with understanding, as if he had already figured her out before she had spoken a word. Michael Jordan remained relaxed, his hands resting comfortably in the pockets of his hoodie, but there was an unmistakable intensity in his gaze. He was studying her, reading every detail, her tired eyes, the way her shoulders sagged slightly from exhaustion, the faint wince she gave when she shifted her weight onto her right foot. He had seen determination before, but there was something else in Lisa, something deeper. "You work 3 jobs, don't you?" His voice was calm, but there was a knowing edge to it. Lisa stiffened slightly, gripping the check a little tighter. "How do you know that?" Jordan let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "I've been sitting in that booth watching you hustle for the last hour. You never stop moving, never take a break, and you're always checking on everyone else before yourself. That's not just a job for you. That's survival." She didn't respond right away, but the slight twitch in her jaw told him he had struck a nerve. "How much sleep do you actually get?" he asked, his voice softer this time, like he already knew the answer. Lisa let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "Doesn't matter. My son needs me." Jordan's expression shifted. He wasn't just making conversation anymore. He was listening. "That's a good answer," he murmured, nodding slightly. Lisa hesitated, unsure of what to make of this interaction. She had dealt with all kinds of customers in her years as a waitress, some rude, some kind, and some who just wanted to talk to fill the silence. But this was different. This man, whoever he was, wasn't just making conversation. He was looking at her like he had already made up his mind about something. She squared her shoulders, her grip on the check tightening. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to do here, but I don't take handouts." Jordan smirked slightly, shaking his head. "That's the thing, Lisa. What if I told you this wasn't charity?" Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Then what is it?" Jordan leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice. "An opportunity." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Her entire life had been a series of struggles, of chasing after chances that never came. And now, a stranger, one who looked vaguely familiar, but whom she still couldn't quite place, was standing in front of her, offering something that didn't make sense. She swallowed hard, straightening her posture as she met his gaze head-on. "What kind of opportunity?" Jordan's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. This was exactly the response he had been waiting for. Lisa stared at the small card in Jordan's hand, her mind racing with questions. The bold black letters printed on the pristine white surface displayed an address. Nothing more. No business name, no explanation. Just a location and a time. Her fingers hovered over it, hesitant, as if touching it would commit her to something she wasn't sure she was ready for. Jordan didn't rush her. He simply held the card between 2 fingers, his expression unreadable, waiting. The noise of the diner seemed to fade into the background, the clatter of plates, the hum of conversation, the distant buzz of the old fluorescent lights overhead. For the first time in a long time, Lisa felt like the center of something. She exhaled slowly, narrowing her eyes. "You really expect me to just show up to some random place because a stranger handed me a card?" Jordan smirked slightly, tucking his free hand into the pocket of his hoodie. "Didn't say you had to." He tilted his head. "But I think you will." Lisa clenched her jaw. The confidence in his voice made her uneasy, not because it was arrogant, but because deep down she knew he was right. Her son, Malik, flashed through her mind. His worn-out shoes, the way he tried to hide his disappointment when she had to work late shifts and miss his basketball games, the exhaustion in his little voice when he told her he understood. He deserved better. Her gaze flickered to the check still in her grasp. $10,000, a miracle, a way out. And yet somehow, this man wasn't even talking about the money anymore. Lisa met his eyes again. "Why?" Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Why are you doing this?" She pressed, gripping the check tighter. "I've been struggling for years, working my ass off just to keep my head above water. No one has ever stepped in to help me before. So why now? Why me? Jordan studied her for a moment, then simply said, because I see something in you. Lisa let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. That's not an answer. Maybe not, Jordan admitted, his smirk returning. But it's the only one I've got for now. He extended the card a little further. Meet me at this address tomorrow. Bring your son. Lisa stared at him, trying to read his face, trying to find a reason to say no. But the truth was, she didn't have one. Hesitantly, she reached out and took the card, feeling its smooth surface between her fingers. She could still walk away. She could rip it up, pretend this never happened. But deep down, she knew. This wasn't just about her anymore. Lisa tightened her grip on the card, inhaling sharply. She had no idea what was waiting for her tomorrow. Lisa's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she turned onto the long, paved driveway, her heart pounding harder with every second. The mansion before her was nothing like the rundown apartment she and Malik called home. It wasn't just big. It was the kind of place you only saw in magazines. Tall iron gates, manicured lawns, and a house so massive it felt more like a luxury hotel than a home. From the passenger seat, Malik's wide eyes darted between the towering palm trees lining the property. Mom, are we in the right place? Lisa swallowed hard, gripping the wheel even tighter. I think so. She pulled up to the gate, feeling impossibly out of place in her old sedan. A uniformed security guard stepped forward, glancing at them before giving a polite nod. Without hesitation, he pressed a button, and the massive gates began to slide open. Lisa's stomach flipped. They're expecting us. As she eased the car forward, Malik pressed his hands against the window, his face filled with wonder. This place is insane. Who lives here? Lisa didn't answer. She had a feeling she already knew. She parked in front of the entrance, hesitating for a moment before cutting the engine. The silence in the car felt heavy, her nerves tightening in her chest. Malik turned to her, his small voice laced with uncertainty. Mom, what if this is a mistake? Lisa exhaled, forcing a reassuring smile. Then we turn around and go home. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. The second she stepped out, the front doors of the mansion swung open. A tall man dressed in black greeted them with a warm nod. Right this way, Miss Carter. Lisa hesitated but took Malik's hand and followed. The moment they stepped inside, she felt the weight of the world shift around her. The entrance alone was overwhelming. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the space in golden sunlight. It smelled expensive, like polished wood and fresh linen. Every step she took echoed slightly, a reminder of just how different this world was from the one she knew. Malik tugged at her hand, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, this is crazy. Lisa couldn't argue. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway ahead. A figure emerged, tall, commanding, familiar. Malik's breath caught in his throat. His grip on Lisa's hand tightened. His voice trembled with disbelief. Mom, that's Michael Jordan. Lisa still couldn't wrap her head around what was happening. Just minutes ago, she and Malik had stepped into a house so grand it didn't feel real. Now they were walking through a hallway lined with framed jerseys and trophies, each one holding a piece of history. The air smelled of leather and polished wood, and every step they took felt surreal. Michael Jordan led them with an effortless confidence, his presence commanding yet oddly comforting. Lisa had seen him on TV, in commercials, in highlight reels, but standing here, in his home, it was something else. Entirely. Jordan stopped at a pair of sleek glass doors and turned to face them. His expression was unreadable. You're probably wondering why you're here. Lisa folded her arms, still cautious. The thought crossed my mind. A smirk tugged at the corner of Jordan's lips. He pushed the doors open. Then let me show you. Lisa stepped inside and immediately felt the temperature drop. The scent of polished hardwood filled the air, the sound of distant echoes bouncing off the walls. It was a full-sized indoor basketball court, pristine, shining under bright overhead lights. Malik's jaw dropped. No way! Jordan grabbed a basketball from a nearby rack and spun it effortlessly in his hands. I've been watching people my whole life, and I don't just mean on the court. He turned to Lisa, his tone serious. I see determination when it walks through a door. I see people who won't quit, even when everything is stacked against them. That's you. Lisa blinked, taken aback. Me? Jordan nodded, then turned to Malik. And I see raw talent that deserves a chance. Malik straightened, His wide eyes locked on Jordan's every word. Jordan tossed the ball toward him, a perfect spiral through the air. Malik caught it instinctively, his fingers gripping the leather. "Let's see what you got, kid," Jordan said, taking a step back. Malik clutched the ball to his chest. "For real?" He swallowed hard. "Against you!" Jordan's smirk widened. "Unless you're scared." Lisa's breath caught as she watched her son's eyes light up. This wasn't just a game. This was a moment Malik would never forget. Malik could hardly believe it. He stood at the free throw line, gripping the basketball, his heart pounding so loudly it felt like it echoed in the massive gym. Across from him, Michael Jordan stood relaxed, hands on his hips, watching with an amused but focused expression. This wasn't just some neighborhood pickup game. This was a test, a moment that could change everything. Lisa stood on the sidelines, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had seen Malik play before, seen his passion for basketball, but this was different. The way his posture straightened, the way his grip on the ball tightened, this wasn't just excitement, this was hunger. Jordan dribbled once, the sound of the ball bouncing against the polished wood sharp and steady. "Clock's running, kid. Show me what you got." Malik didn't hesitate. He moved fast, quicker than Jordan expected, darting left before crossing over to the right. He drove toward the basket, his sneakers squeaking against the floor, his focus locked in. But just as he went for the layup, thud, Jordan's hand swatted the ball midair, sending it bouncing toward the sideline. Malik stumbled slightly, catching himself before turning around, his eyes wide with shock. Lisa inhaled sharply, her protective instincts flaring. But before she could react, she saw it, Jordan's smirk. "Not bad," Jordan said, nodding approvingly. "But you think I was gonna let that slide?" Malik exhaled, shaking off the moment, determination hardening in his eyes. He retrieved the ball and dribbled back to the three-point line. If Jordan was going to play tough, he had to be smarter. This time he faked a drive, stepping back just as Jordan moved forward. With a quick, fluid motion, Malik released a perfect jumper. The ball arced high. Swish, nothing but net. Lisa gasped. Jordan chuckled, rubbing his chin. "Now that," Jordan said, pointing at Malik, "was impressive." Malik's chest swelled with pride, his breath still ragged from the effort. He wiped sweat from his brow, staring up at Jordan, waiting, hoping. Jordan held his gaze for a long moment, then turned toward Lisa. His expression shifted, more serious now. "Now," he said, walking toward her, "let's talk about you." Lisa's breath was still uneven as she watched Malik, his face glowing with pride after going one-on-one with Michael Jordan. The boy was still catching his breath, bouncing lightly on his feet, clearly not wanting this moment to end. But as Jordan turned to Lisa, his expression shifting from playful to serious, a strange feeling settled in her chest. She braced herself. "So," Jordan said, folding his arms as he studied her, "your son's got talent, but I think you already knew that." Lisa nodded slowly. "Yeah, he's always loved basketball." Jordan smirked. "And from what I hear, you've always loved working. 3 jobs, barely any sleep, raising him on your own." Lisa stiffened. She didn't like being pitied, and she certainly didn't like talking about her struggles with strangers, even if that stranger happened to be Michael Jordan. "I do what I have to do," Jordan nodded, unfazed. "That's what I respect about you. You work hard. You don't quit. And you don't take handouts." He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. "That's why I'm not offering you one." Lisa blinked. "What?" Jordan reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek business card, and handed it to her. "I own a lot of businesses, Lisa, and I know good people when I see them. I need someone like you on my team." Lisa hesitated before taking the card. She glanced at it, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't a bank or a loan office. It was the name of one of Jordan's companies, a real established company. This isn't charity, is it?" she whispered. Jordan chuckled. "Lisa, if I was offering you charity, I wouldn't be making you work for it." His expression grew serious again. "This is a real job. Full-time. Good salary. Enough that you'll never have to work 3 shifts again just to survive." Lisa's throat tightened. She had spent years breaking her back just to keep the lights on, working herself to the bone so Malik would never feel like he was missing out. And now in a single moment, she was being handed an opportunity that could change everything. Malik grabbed her hand, his small fingers squeezing tightly. "Mom, this means you won't have to be so tired all the time." he said softly. Lisa swallowed hard. Her whole life she had never accepted help. Not when she had been struggling to pay rent. Not when she had to scrape by on tips. But this wasn't help. This was a chance. Her hands trembled as she met Jordan's gaze. I, I don't know what to say, Jordan smiled. Then don't say anything yet. Just think about it. Lisa exhaled shakily, staring down at the card in her hand. She knew the answer already. But before she could respond, Jordan smirked. Oh, and one more thing. Lisa frowned. What? Jordan pulled something from his pocket and tossed it to her. You're going to need this. Lisa sat in the dimly lit living room of her small apartment, the business card Michael Jordan had given her resting in her palm. She traced the embossed letters with her fingertips, her mind racing. It felt surreal. A job, a way out, a chance to stop running herself into the ground just to keep Malik fed and clothed. But could she really accept it? She had spent so many years rejecting handouts, standing on her own, proving that she could make it. Yet this wasn't charity. Jordan had made that clear. He saw something in her, something worth investing in. A small voice interrupted her thoughts. Mom? Lisa turned to see Malik standing in the hallway, rubbing his sleepy eyes. His oversized t-shirt hung off his small frame, and his curls were messy from sleep. Why are you still awake, sweetheart? She asked softly. Malik walked over and plopped down beside her on the couch. He glanced at the card in her hand, then at her face. Are you going to take the job? Lisa hesitated, then sighed. I don't know. Malik frowned. Why not? She looked down, searching for the right words. Because I've never had anything come easy, Malik, and things like this don't just happen. Malik was quiet for a moment, then he grabbed her hand. Mom, you work harder than anyone I know. If Mr. Jordan thinks you deserve this, why don't you? Lisa swallowed the lump in her throat. Out of the mouths of babes. She looked into her son's hopeful eyes and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about her. It was about him, about their future, about breaking the cycle of exhaustion and struggle. She took a deep breath and wiped the corner of her eye before nodding. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. Malik grinned and threw his arms around her. Yes. The next morning, Lisa stood outside Jordan's office building, heart pounding. She stepped inside, took a steadying breath, and made her way to the receptionist. I'm here for Mr. Jordan, she said, her voice firm. Minutes later, she was led into an office where Jordan sat casually, feet propped up, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, saw her standing there, and smirked. Took you long enough? Lisa smiled, nerves and excitement colliding inside her. I'm in. Jordan leaned forward, nodding approvingly. Good choice. Then just as she exhaled in relief, he grinned. Oh, and one more thing. Lisa sat across from Michael Jordan in his office, still processing the life-altering decision she had just made. The weight she had carried for years, the exhaustion of juggling 3 jobs, the sleepless nights worrying about bills, the constant fear of falling behind, felt a little lighter. She had just secured a stable job, something she never thought possible, but the way Jordan leaned back in his chair, that smirk playing on his lips, made her suspicious. One more thing, he said, pulling something out of his pocket. Lisa's eyes narrowed. What now? Jordan placed a single key on the desk between them. She stared at it, confused. What's this? She asked hesitantly. Jordan folded his arms. Your new home. Lisa blinked, sure she had misheard him. My what? Jordan nodded toward the key. Fully paid for apartment. No rent, no mortgage. No more sleepless nights worrying about where you'll live next. It's yours. Lisa's breath hitched. She couldn't move. Couldn't even reach for the... This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Her voice trembled. Michael, I can't accept this. Jordan let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. You think I'm giving this to you out of pity? He leaned forward, locking eyes with her. I don't do handouts, Lisa. I do investments. And I'm investing in you. Lisa's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him she had fought for everything she had, that nothing in her life had ever been easy. But wasn't that exactly why she should take it? Her thoughts were interrupted when Jordan spoke again, his tone softer this time. Your son deserves to wake up in a safe place, to have space to grow, to dream, to become something great. And you deserve to come home after work and just breathe. That was it. That was what broke her. Lisa's legs gave out and she dropped to her knees. A sob escaped her lips before she could stop it. She covered her face with both hands, overwhelmed. For so long, she had carried everything on her back. She had never known what it felt like to have someone lighten the load. Jordan stood and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You're not in this alone anymore, Lisa." Lisa looked up, tears streaming down her face. She finally reached for the key. Lisa stood in front of the mirror, smoothing out the fabric of her crisp new blazer. It still felt strange. Not the clothes, but the reality they represented. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. No stained apron, no aching feet from double shifts. Today, she was walking into an office, stepping into a new life that didn't revolve around mere survival. She turned to Malik, who sat on the couch lacing up his brand new basketball shoes, a sharp contrast to the battered sneakers he had worn just months ago. His face radiated excitement as he bounced a basketball on the floor, the sound filling their cozy new apartment. An apartment she still couldn't believe belonged to them. "Ready, Mom?" he asked, grinning. Lisa exhaled, gripping her purse. More than ready. Walking into her new workplace, Lisa felt something unfamiliar: pride. The office was nothing like the noisy, grease-stained diners she had worked in before. The hum of computers replaced the clatter of dishes, and the scent of fresh coffee filled the air instead of fried food. Employees greeted her warmly, showing her to her desk, explaining her role. It was more than a job. It was stability, respect, a future. Meanwhile, Malik had his own transformation happening. After years of watching basketball games on TV, he was finally stepping onto a real court, not just the cracked pavement of their old neighborhood. Jordan had arranged for him to join a youth basketball league, and from the moment he stepped onto the polished hardwood floor, something in him clicked. Lisa rushed from work every evening to make it to Malik's games. She cheered from the bleachers, watching as he dribbled, passed, and sank shots with a confidence she had never seen in him before. He was thriving, growing into the player he had always dreamed of becoming. And Lisa? She was finally able to sit in the stands, not as a struggling single mother working triple shifts, but as a proud mom who could just be there for her son. Lisa sat at her desk, finishing up some paperwork when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A deep, familiar voice came through the line. Lisa Carter. Her breath caught. There was no mistaking it. "Michael?" Jordan chuckled on the other end. "How's life treating you?" Lisa swallowed the lump in her throat, glancing around her office, then at the framed photo of Malik in his basketball uniform. "Better than I ever thought possible." Jordan's voice held amusement. "Good, because I've got one more surprise for you." Lisa sat on her balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars scattered across the skyline. The night air was cool, carrying with it a quiet peace that felt foreign yet welcome. Just a year ago, this kind of moment, where she could sit, breathe, and not worry about bills piling up or how she'd put food on the table, had been nothing more than a distant dream. Now it was her life, a life she had built. Inside, Malik was sprawled across the couch, flipping between basketball highlights and his own recorded games. His skills had grown tremendously. He wasn't just another kid playing on a neighborhood court anymore. He was one of the top players in his youth league, catching the attention of coaches who saw something special in him. Lisa's phone buzzed on the table beside her. She glanced at the screen and smiled. "Michael Jordan," she answered, leaning back in her chair. "If this is another surprise, Michael, I don't know if my heart can handle it." Jordan's deep chuckle rumbled through the speaker. "No surprises, just checking in." Lisa exhaled, thinking back to the woman she used to be, the exhausted, overworked single mother who never had time to dream. "You know," she said, "when you gave me that job, I thought it was a handout. I was afraid to take it. I didn't want to feel like I owed anyone." Jordan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It was never about charity, Lisa. It was about belief. You had the drive, the talent. You just needed someone to see it." She swallowed hard, blinking back the sting of tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," Jordan replied. "Just pay it forward." Inside, Malik called out, "Mom, you have to see this replay. I actually got double-teamed today." Lisa laughed, shaking her head as she stood. "Gotta go. Duty calls." Jordan's voice carried warmth. "Keep going, Lisa. You're just getting started." As she hung up and stepped inside, she felt something shift deep within her. This journey had never just been about money, or even about the job. It had been about something far greater, the power of someone believing in you when you couldn't see your own worth. Weeks later, a news story went viral. Single mother's journey from struggle to success thanks to a simple act of belief. Millions were inspired. And Lisa? She wasn't just living her story. She was rewriting it.